Alrighty. Well, welcome to the 12th take, everyone. Trying out something a little bit different. It's me, Kelii, your favorite Aggie, and right now I'm here in Austin, in my hometown, my home, where I grew up. So a little bit of a makeshift setup today, but there hasn't been too much content over the summer, but Brady and I are super pumped to get it going again, starting here in a week or two, especially because we got the season coming up, right? We have Notre Dame that's only like 3 weeks away. So there's a lot of reason to be excited right now about college football. And we just want to take some of our notes from our episode on Spotify covering the Duke defense under Mike Elko, and we want to bring it here because I think it'd be a cool way to be able to interact with y'all live. Should y'all have any questions? Not to mention, I do think that YouTube is probably going to be the move moving forward, but we will see. So with that though, we are going to pull up my notes before I also get to some of the questions that y'all had for us on Instagram. Uh, you know, we put a poll out asking y'all some questions, and I was able to, get some stuff, get some of y'all's questions from y'all, and we're gonna be able to address those just about the defense. So super excited for what is going to be going on. So the first thing that we want to. Oh man, why is the chat disabled, boy? Let's see the stream. The first thing that we want to. Oh man, why is the chat disabled, boy? Well, unfortunately, for some reason it says the chat is disabled unless I'm just not able to look at it. That's a shame. Um, that's my bad. I'll get that set up for next time. But I guess right now I'll just be giving my thoughts, and y'all go comment, like swipe up on the story on Instagram, or go comment on our latest post if y'all have any questions, because for some reason the chat's not working. I'm still getting used to this since it's my first time. But first thing we're going to take on, right, is just some general notes from this defense. The first thing that I noticed, of course, is going to be the linebackers, right? This defense under Mike Elko was very heavily reliant on a front four generating pressure and disrupting things in the running game, so that the linebackers could come in, clean up anything, come up and run support, and they were playing sideline to sideline in pass defense, especially with the really short stuff or behind the line of scrimmage, any swing passes, screens, RPOs of that nature. So the linebackers were really featured here, but it was interesting because Duke had a couple of solid defensive linemen, both of whom I think transferred, Aeneas Peebles and RJ Oben. Oben transferred to Notre Dame, so we'll see in week one. But that front four generated so much pressure on their own. There were very few times where they needed to send extra guys to hit home on the quarterback from the pass rush. So, I really I view what's happening down there is like the linebackers are the featured unit of that defense, and quite frankly, I mean, we're set up well for that, right? Why? Because first of all, the defensive line is so deep and talented that we are going to be able to generate pressure right away, right? With a four-man front, only sending four, we're going to be able to generate pressure, which means that we don't have to send extra guys. We can, kind of sit back, play a base defense, or maybe give them some different looks. But those linebackers don't have to, go after the quarterback in order for him to go down, because the front four is going to do their job. And that means that the linebackers like Torian York, Scooby Williams, Solomon DeShields, those guys, they're going to be able to just do their thing and rack up tackles, right? So I'm really looking forward to that. And I mean, this defense, I mean, it was pretty incredible. Um, they shut down Clemson. I think it was like a 21-7 victory, or 28-7 or something like that. And Another thing I noticed was there was a lot of cover three, a lot of single high formations pre snap. Occasionally they'd kind of roll into a two high look post snap, but pre snap a lot of single high safety stuff. There's a lot of the safeties doing their job too, which is going to be good for Bryce Anderson, right? He's shown here on your screen, but Anderson had to play like nickel corner because he had to play in the slot. Because why? Because we didn't have anyone else who could, right? Josh DeBerry was forced to play outside, even though he was a slot guy. Bryce was like the best slot guy we had. Kind of a tough situation, but that's where Bryce was. This year, though, it's been made very known that Bryce Anderson will be playing as a high safety, more of a free safety rather than a strong safety. So that's going to be exciting news. Why? Because he is also going to be featured in this defense. In that game for Duke, their high safety was rangy, playing sideline to sideline, whether it was, perfectly timing hits to draw the ball loose in pass coverage or actually making a play on the ball itself and be able to pick it off. It was well designed with, on the outside, long, rangy, and fast corners. So that way that safety could play sideline to sideline and be able to pick up whatever he needed to and make plays on the football. That also allows that other safety to play, closer in the box. So that way you have another man in run defense. So this defense, it's going to be more of like a 4-2-5, right? You're generally always going to have five defensive backs out there, especially with some of the teams we play. The one thing to remember, though, with this defense is it's going to be a little small, right? That's why you want that extra safety in the box, because if you're constantly running only two linebackers out there, even with that slot corner, that's not as desirable as a traditional 4-3. We would have that third backer instead of that slot corner. So having that strong safety kind of moving closer to the line of scrimmage along with a slot corner means that you're going to be able to, it allows you to execute some more exotic blitzes. It allows you to have more guys in the box to defend the run. But it really does stress the importance of that single high safety and those outside corners, right? They're going to be responsible for a lot, and I'm interested to see who those guys on the outside are, who develop into, who develops into the starters. Is it BJ Mays? Is it Des Ricks, Tyreek Chappelle, Will Lee? We have a whole host of guys, and some of them who I didn't even mention, just because there's so many talented players on the back end of this defense who could go out there and, kick some butt. So looking at the defense, I'm really excited. Another thing that stuck out to me was just how physical the defensive backs were in run support and crashing on the line of scrimmage, especially on a screen or an RPO, something like that. We saw some more of that in the spring game because I think that was a problem for our defense this past year. Was the players in the secondary didn't do as good of a job at coming up and being physical, right? We know Josh DeBerry was a really good tackler. I mean, he's a slot corner. He's supposed to be good at tackling, right? But this year, in the spring game at least, I think we saw some better tackling at the second level. There were a couple, big runs that were ripped off by like Amari Daniels and Reuben Owens. But I think that we improved in that area. But I still want to see us take a few more steps in that direction. But it was good to see that Duke defense was very, very disciplined in that sense. Just a couple, statistics to note is that Duke went from allowing, I think it was 33 points the year before Elko arrived in Durham, and they were 3-9, went to allowing, I believe it was like 22 points in his first year, in which they went 9-4, and then this past year they only allowed 19. So this defense has drastically improved after Mike Elko arrived and continued to improve after he had a second year with his guys. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is that this defense, this whole team in general, especially with all the new players, the new transfers, what it takes to gel, build a culture and all that, it's very possible that year 2 under Mike Elko is the year to watch, right? That'll be very interesting to see, how well we do and, which guys really develop, who takes those next steps. But this year, I do think we could surprise a lot of people. So let's get in real quick to some of the questions that y'all have for Brady and I. I know Brady's not here. right now, but he will, of course, be joining us very soon. So the first question we got, right, was, talk linebackers, as I feel like we could be really good there this year. Yeah, man. I mean, those linebackers, they're definitely going to be a really strong unit. I think there's no denying that. The problem is, though, right, you have a lot of guys who are relatively unproven. Beyond Torian York. Just Solomon DeShields is probably the most. I mean, he's the most experienced out of any of them. But York, I view as definitely the alpha dog of that group, just because DeShields has been in the collegiate level for a few years now. But Scooby Williams, right? Not great last year, but has tremendous athletic upside. Not to mention the familiarity with linebackers coach in DC, Jay Bateman. And he's playing in a scheme that's very similar to what he had at Florida, right? Jay Bateman's scheme as a DC at Florida was, that's one of the reasons why he was brought over here to College Station, was because of his similar scheme to what Mike Elko wants to run. Mike Elko wants someone to run his defense, to call his plays, so that way he can be the CEO managerial type role that Chip Kelly did not want out at UCLA. Solomon DeShields, a very productive linebacker coming out of Pittsburgh, very talented when he played this past year, tackles for loss, just all over the place. Very instinctual, and personally, I see him as the number 2 guy alongside Torian York, who's the clear-cut number 1 linebacker on this team. The excellent season he had last year, all freshman, all-American team, just an immense talent, former 3-star, so a gem out of Temple, Texas. He's a guy who you're going to build around for the next couple years here. And then the other guy I have up here is Damian Sanford, who's going to enter his second year with the program. He's someone who could carve out a little bit of a role, depending on how DeShields and how Williams looks. Sanford could, grow beyond just a special teams player, and he's definitely poised to earn more playing time going into his third year. But I kind of wonder, can he carve out some snaps for himself this season, a little bit ahead of schedule, just because that number 2 spot behind York is kind of up for grabs technically. But if I had to pin the tail on someone, I think it would be, I would have DeShields as my number 2 guy at this point, with Williams in third place. But yeah, linebackers, I think we're going to be really solid because you have the established option of Torian York there. And, he's someone who I really trust to call plays or to get the play calls for defense and to organize everything. He's a leader, as seen by the fact that he was voted as a team captain heading into year 2. So he's an alpha dog, someone that, I think every team in the country would want to have on their team. So we're really lucky to have York, especially considering the pedigree he had coming out of high school, finding a diamond in the rough. But looking back now, you kind of wonder, like, gee, how did everyone miss what we found? So that's what we got for linebackers. I think it's a really solid unit, but I don't know if they're going to be anything. No, I think they could be special, but I think that the lack of clear-cut options beyond York is going to, I think it will be solved down the stretch of the season. But for right now, I do think that York and DeShields are a solid 1-2. They'll be tested against Notre Dame, though, especially having to defend Riley Leonard, who is a very dangerous dual-threat quarterback, someone who Mike Elko is very familiar with from his time at Duke, though. We're going to move on to the next question. Only have 2. Are the defensive backs, defensive line, or the linebackers the strength of the defense? It's a defensive line, in my opinion. Yeah, for me, it's really not that close. As talented as Torian York is and Bryce Anderson, they are each really, I guess if you throw in Tyreek Chappelle as well, those 3 guys are the only returners at those position groups who really are starting quality at this point, right? Like I just talked about with the linebackers, you have Solomon DeShields and Scooby Williams, maybe even Damian Sanford, who could earn some playing time. But at defensive back, at corner, you have Des Ricks, Will Lee, Donovan Saunders, BJ Mays, right? Even Terry Bussey. just a lot of guys, Tyreek Chappelle, who are all competing for starters playing time. And then at safety, right, you have you have Bryce Anderson, you have Marcus Radcliffe, right? You have nuts. You have Miles Davis and Jordan Pride, the true freshman, over there at safety. You just have a lot of dudes who are fighting for playing time, and we don't know how proven all of them are at this level, right? Terry Bussey, he's going to take time to acclimate from 2A Texas high school football to SEC football, right? Whether we like it or not, it's going to be an adjustment, right? You look at some other guys like BJ Mays, Marcus Radcliffe, Donovan Saunders. These guys are coming from smaller schools, which they clearly dominated there, which is why we brought them in. But we don't know how they're going to fare against these SEC wide receivers, these SEC offenses and quarterbacks. So for me, the strength is clearly the defense, where you have potentially multiple first round picks in Nick Scorton and Shamar Turner and Shamar Stewart. So not maybe even Cassius Howell. You're 2 or 3 deep everywhere on the defensive line there, right? Nick Scorton, Cassius Howell, Shamar Stewart, Shamar Turner, right? All on the outside, although Turner is apparently flexing inside. That'll be a nice change for him. And then, DJ Hicks, Gabe Brownlow-Dindy, right? You have Isaiah Rakes. You have a lot of guys who it's your deepest unit, right? In terms of proven quality, not to mention the top of the roster or the top of the depth chart there is also where you're strongest. So, considering how it's the strongest at the top and from top to bottom, no matter what position group you're talking about, I think here that the defensive line, headlined by Purdue transfer Nick Scorton, is definitely the strongest unit of this team, right? I mean, he led the Big Ten in sacks last year on a Purdue team that, they had some dogs in the secondary, but he was really the only defensive lineman who teams had to worry about, and he still racked up a conference-leading 10 sacks in the Big Ten. So, he's a local kid. He's from Bryan, and it'll be a little bit of a homecoming for him. Really excited for what he can do this season. But the defensive line, definitely the strength of the defense here. So those are all the questions we got. Next, I'm going to move into something. I didn't have a graphic for it, so it is what it is. But, you kind of look at what the news that broke today, right? You look at ESPN, and they released the coaches poll for preseason poll for 2024. Number 1, Georgia, 2, Ohio State, 3, Oregon, 4, Texas, and 5, Alabama. With Georgia getting a majority of the first place votes, Ohio State getting 7, Texas getting 1, and then at rank 8, Michigan also received 1 first place vote. Wonder who that was from. Your Fighting Texas Aggies come in at rank 20, just ahead of Arizona, NC State, USC, Kansas, and Iowa to round up the top 25, and just behind the University of Miami, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Oklahoma, and Tennessee. That's 15 through 19 right there. So you are already looking at, right, a top 20 matchup week 1 in Kyle Field against Notre Dame. Notre Dame comes in at number 7, just ahead of Michigan and just behind Ole Miss at number 6. Personally, I would want the motivation of being unranked, right? Earn that respect, right? We don't want anything to be given to us. Now, a win against Notre Dame in week 1 would go a long way in earning that, right? Because suddenly there's no denying that, hey, we deserve to be ranked. We deserve to be a top 10, top 15 team, right, if we beat Notre Dame. But right now, I just personally, I don't care too much about preseason polls because they don't mean anything. You know what I mean? So this is something where I take it with a grain of salt, but Notre Dame is a top 10 team. It's going to make that matchup really interesting. And, in other news with that, Notre Dame's left tackle Charles Jagusa tore his pec and is going to be out for the season. That was, like 40 minutes ago. So we're looking at a Notre Dame team who loses a lot on the offensive line and now just lost even more. They're not going to have much time to gel, especially with a new quarterback. So we could catch them at the perfect time, but we also have to remember nearly our entire defense has to gel together. This entire team, very new considering half of the players on our roster were added, this year through the transfer portal or recruiting. So replacing half your roster is never going to be an easy task. But the way I look at it, right, everyone's new. We're all going to improve throughout the season. So it's very possible we drop that game to Notre Dame. Personally, I do think that we're going to lose, but I think it's going to be a really close one. But I would give Notre Dame the edge there just because of the experience of some of those players and that stout defense that is going to be ready to wreak havoc. I mean, that defensive line with guys like Ben Morrison, Xavier Watts, and Howard Cross and RJ Oben is going to be really difficult to deal with. It's going to prove to be a really difficult test for this offense. And Colin Klein, who's our new offensive coordinator, Connor Wigman is healthy though, so anything can happen, especially week 1 in Kyle Field with College game day in town under the lights at night. So I would not rule anything out, but if I had to put a pin on a score right now, I think I would lean 30-27 Notre Dame. That's just my thoughts right now, right? I'm interested to see or hear y'all's thoughts on it, but quite frankly, I'm at the point right now where just looking at the matchups, I do think that Notre Dame is right now better suited to simply out-talent us on defense, which, they're one of the few teams in the country who can out-talent us. But it's going to be a great game, and I'm really interested to see how that one turns out. So that's all we got for y'all today, and, thanks for bearing with me here. First video, first podcast style video I've live streamed to YouTube here. Expect a lot more. Check out our Spotify, of course, because on Spotify, that's where you'll find our whole host of YouTube, or not YouTube, of our podcast episodes dating all the way back to last season, our predictions, our recaps, and preview shows. They're all going to be back this next season, and Brady and I will be keeping track of our own records for game picks in this 2024 season, and we're very excited for this 12-team playoff. So, hope you all have a great week, great rest of your day, great Monday, and thanks for tuning in. Catch you guys later.